On Friday, the world watched in shock as one of the most historic and storied conferences in the country collapsed. Days after Colorado had jumped for the Big 12 and about 8 months after USC and UCLA had moved to the Big 10, the remaining four corner schools moved to the Big 12, leaving just four members of Pac 12 and sealing the doom for the Pac 12 conference. Or did they? Now, there's a lot of discussion right now about ways that the Pac 12 can be saved, and the four remaining members are desperate to try and make that happen because the prospects for them are a little bleak, at least from their perspective. The Mountain West looks very, very unappetizing. Potentially a landing spot for Oregon State and Washington State, but definitely for the elitist Cal and Stanford, not a place they want to go. So those two members especially, but the four remaining in general, are fighting for survival, and we're going to go through two options that have appeared for ways that the Pac-12 could be saved. Now, we're going to look at these two proposed solutions, and we're going to ask first, how likely are they? And secondly, would the Pac-12 still be a Power 5 conference? Well, the first solution that has come out, and this is actually being reported on, this is something that is definitely in the works. How likely it is to happen right now is very unclear. It's just discussion phase, but what is definitely in the works right now is potential Mountain West Pac-12 merger versus the Mountain West picking off Pac-12 schools or the Pac-12 picking off the cream of the Mountain West. A straight merger between the two conference leaderships, between the two conference school bases to form a new Pac-12. Now, this is much, much better than the other solutions. I believe it is the only way that the Pac-12 can incorporate Mountain West members. Because Mountain West members right now have to pay a $34 million buyout if they are going to join the Pac-12 for 2024. And what is left, the crust of the Pac-12, is not worth that $34 million. In addition to it no longer potentially being a Power 5 conference, that is all in the air. It's unstable and uncertain. They also don't have a steady or actual TV deal right now. The one that's on the table, Apple TV, comes with a lot of risks, especially when you're talking about national prominence. So this is really the only way that I believe the Pac-12 is going to be able to convince Mountain West schools to join. And it would only be a Pac-12 in name only. But there are a lot of benefits from this. You'd get to be able to keep the strong Mountain West teams, would be able to join, and you'd be able to get them without having to go through some kind of elaborate bargaining process. They wouldn't have to pay the buyout. They'd be able to join the conference. And the Mountain West would get the Pac-12 name, the image, which of course carries a lot of weight. And more importantly than that, their bowl associations. Right now, the Mountain West bowl associations are probably the worst, among the worst in the country, right up there with Conference USA and the MAC for the worst bowl associations in the country. So you'll be able to get their bowl associations and potentially maintain the Power 5 status of the Pac-12. And that's something we'll talk about at the end. Regardless of how this plays out, the current Pac-12 commissioner cannot be in place for this merger to take place. What is actually looking like is going to happen is if this goes through, Gloria Nevarez is going to be the one elevated to the position of Pac-12 commissioner. The current Pac-12 commissioner has absolutely abdicated any rights to the throne here and has destroyed this conference. No Mountain West school, no school of any type should be getting in bed with that commissioner in this scenario that has been proposed because he is absolutely destroyed the Pac-12 and has no idea how to run this conference. So if the Mountain West schools are going to join, it should be Gloria Nevarez, which makes sense because like I said, the Mountain West holds all the cards here. All that the Pac-12 has to offer is its potential name right now. And right now, that's not worth the asking price of giving up your own independence as a conference. So the Mountain West, if they join, it will be the Mountain West with the Pac-12 name. The Mountain West will hold the cards. Now, again, this is why this could potentially not end up happening because Stanford and Cal, they believe that they should hold the bargaining power because they're the academic institutions. They're the elitists. They're the Pac-12 Power 5, and they should be able to dictate who joins the conference. And if they hold on to that status, there's a strong potential that this is not going to work out. Now, how is this going to work out in the end? Now, obviously, I've said if it is going to happen, Gloria Nevarez needs to be elevated. That is what it's looking like would happen in this scenario. But how much control does Stanford and Cal hold? Stanford and Cal definitely don't want to see every Mountain West team join the Mountain West, the new Pac-12 Mountain West. And I think that there's a potential that you could see some Mountain West schools cut as part of this bargaining mutual benefit for the majority of the members. You could see a few Mountain West schools left behind. Now, which ones would be the first on the chopping block? My assumption would be San Jose State and Hawaii. Neither of those programs had anything in basketball, which is going to be a big part of this deal. And they also have been inconsistent, to say the best, in football. San Jose State has done a little bit better recently, but Hawaii's football program is on the brink. And I think that if you were going to look at two schools that add little to this conversation, it would be those two, followed probably by Nevada and Wyoming would be the next two up. I can see any four of those schools ending up not in this conversation. But what are you looking at here as a potential Mountain West Pac-12 merger? You're looking at somewhere between 12 and 16 teams total. So either all 12 Mountain West schools join with the 4 Pac-12 to make 16, or you see somewhere in the range of 8 to 10 Mountain West schools join to make a round of 12-team conference for the Pac-12, and maybe you add some additional schools from across the country to strengthen your brand, especially if you are going to add all of the Mountain West schools. You would need to add a basketball member to make up for Hawaii, whose basketball does not play in the Mountain West right now, so maybe going out and get Gonzaga has been suggested. So what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at here Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, Stanford, Boise State, Air Force, Fresno State, San Diego State, Utah State, UNLV, New Mexico, and Colorado State. New Mexico is saved by its basketball program, and I think that's why you end up seeing them here in the Pac-12. Colorado State, which has been just terrible in football, has invested enormous amounts of money into their program and has great facilities, so I see them also coming into this. You probably see Nevada, Wyoming, San Jose State, and Hawaii left behind. And in this scenario, is this new conference a Power 5 conference? That is a significant question. I think that it would depend greatly on how the next couple of years go for the Mountain West. This next season, if you have multiple Mountain West teams getting into the top 25, the American Athletic Conference no longer holds the top spot in the media's eyes because of their lost members, and you're able to build up some status, potentially then you could pull over those strong national rankings into the new Pac-12 and keep that Power 5 image going. It's going to be shaky. I'm not sure is the main answer here. I think it's potential. I mean, you have Boise State. Boise State is a Power 5 team in a Group of 5 conference right now. They definitely deserve this step up, and they definitely deserve to be a Power 5 brand. So you have Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford, which are all current Power 5 teams. So I think an argument could be made that Cal is probably not in the top level of the Power 5 in general. Doesn't truly stand alone. But Stanford, that's a national championship winning team. Washington State has had lots of success in the last decade, and Oregon State had a great year last year and seems to be on the upward trend. Boise State obviously is Boise State. Air Force has been consistently strong. That's a strong football program. Fresno State is, again, another team that's been consistently strong. San Diego State has had their moments, and of course they add a large market value. Utah State on and off, and then the rest of the schools are basketball schools. So is this a Power 5 conference? The answer to that question is maybe. It would all depend on how they are able to structure themselves together. I think you would probably need to add a couple of elite Group of 5 schools like potentially a Memphis, SMU, or Tulane to this conversation to be able to maintain Power 5. It would be the weakest of the Power 5 if they were able to maintain, though they would be right up there in competition with ACC, which ACC is absolutely garbage right now besides Clemson. So they would be in competition with ACC to potentially be considered a Power 5 or one of the Power 5 conferences, but I do believe they would be the weakest. But I think there's a strong possibility that this could go through. It is probably the most likely of the scenarios on the table. I believe to save the Pac-12, this is truly the most likely option and probably the one that has the best chance of success. And if you really want to save this conference, keep the geographic unity that has made up this region, have a West Coast conference, which a lot of these commissioners are talking about, this is probably the best option. I do believe that it would at least be able to make a case for itself as a Power 5, but it would all depend on the conference marketing, which the Mountain West has not been good at, but it has a new commissioner who actually cares about their schools, and so there's a potential that with Gloria Nevarez at the head of a new Pac-12, they could market themselves aggressively as the Power 5 brand that the Pac-12 was. Now, that is what is on the table currently as being proposed. If that falls through, or if for some reason the Pac-12 is able to convince a few top-level Mountain West schools to join them and then goes outside searching for other options, I think there's a second scenario in which the Pac-12 could also be saved. I think this is the least likely, but I do think that this is probably the best option from a marketing perspective to a TV buyer. And that, of course, was the issue that the Pac-12 collapsed from in the first place, was the new Apple TV deal and its marketability. Now, I think this option is probably the most attractive from a marketing standpoint, and I think that this option gives them the best chance to be a true Power 5 conference. So this option is what I like to call best of the best. You take some Mountain West schools, you take some other schools. I'm going to talk through each school that I think should be part of this conversation. You take some schools from the rest of the group of 5, the best ones, and you incorporate together a national conference that draws viewership outside of its own fan base. That is going to be extremely important because right now, the Apple TV deal, unless in a new conference setup they can attract some other bidders like ESPN or Fox, which seems unlikely right now, marketing specifically to Apple TV here, what is most important? Forget academics, forget academics, forget geography, forget the number of TV screens in a community size area around a school. Forget about all of that. What's most important with this is brand, rivalries, watchability in general, which includes rivalries, and reach outside of one's own fan base. Because you don't want to have a team on a streaming service where the only people that are ever going to watch those games are the people within their fan base. You want to be able to create national conversation where other people are going to be subscribing, even if it's just for, a couple months at a time. They're going to be subscribing to watch that game. You are trying to market games, not necessarily marketing teams to fan bases. And so in this conversation, Boise State is the most attractive candidate. Boise State is the only school in the group of 5 that has a truly national following. Every single person, if you go anywhere in America and a lot of places in the world, you go anywhere in America and you ask them about group of 5 teams or you ask them about college football teams, in general, they'll know about the teams in their immediate vicinity, their state. They'll know about the big names in the Power 5, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, Alabama. They'll know about the big names of the Power 5 and maybe most of the names of the Power 5. When it comes down to the group of 5, they may not know a lot of teams. You talk to them about Utah State, they might not know who they are. If you talk to them about Miami, Ohio, they might not know who they are. You talk to them about UNLV, etc. They might not know who they are. But if you talk to them about Boise State, everybody knows about Boise State because of the power of the blue. It invites controversy. It invites discussion. You either love it or you hate it. Boise State's also built themselves a national brand through their success on the football field. Boise State is a school which, if you had them in a closed streaming service like Apple TV, you are going to have millions of people, potentially, maybe an exaggeration, but large audiences, hundreds of thousands plus of people outside of the Boise State fan base that are going to subscribe to watch Boise State play. Everybody watches Boise State play. That's why they have such a large TV following, even though they have a relatively small geographic area of fans. They have a massive national following because of their national brand. So Boise State here holds the cards, and those are the types of teams you're looking for. You're looking for the Boise States. You don't care about a school like UNLV that is in a place with a large potential market, but where nobody cares about them. Nobody in Las Vegas cares about UNLV, which is why they are so consistently poorly watched. It's not just the fact that their football program has been consistently terrible. It's also the fact that Las Vegas is not a college town. It's not built around college fandom. It is an entertainment industry, and there's so much to compete with, and the UNLV does not stand out in that scene. So you don't care about UNLV in a situation like this. You care about teams that can pull in national viewers and also teams that have passionate, dedicated fan bases that are going to come out of the woodworks to watch their games and support them. It doesn't matter if you're located in a massive city where nobody cares about. What matters is if you are located in a moderate-sized city where everybody is on your school's bandwagon. So in this scenario, we're looking at a 16-team conference because I think that is what you would need to be able to fully expand and build yourself back up to Power 5 status. When the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma, they had to go out and get 4 Group of 5 schools to make up for that loss. Well, you're the Pac-12, and you just lost 8 programs combined, going from the beginning when the Big 10 pushed USC and UCLA to now at the end when the 4 corner schools have lost. You lost 8 teams truly to incorporate back that number. You cannot just replace those 8 teams with 8 teams. You need to go beyond that to make up for the market value that was lost and for the brand value that you lost when you lost those programs. So who are we looking at right now? 16-team conference, I think you would want to divide this between a West Coast and an East Coast brand to make the national connection across the country. You would, of course, obviously have the remaining 4 Power 5 Pac-12 teams, Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, Stanford. Then you would add Boise State, Fresno State, strong, passionate fan base. They are building themselves up to a national brand. They've been one of the top Group of 5 programs for the last 20 years. Boise State knocking off Fresno State early on when you had Carr at the helm, not his brother, but the original Carr at the helm, is what part of what built Boise State's brand. Fresno State has always been one of those top-level competitive teams in the group of five. They have a strong football program, and now they have a stronger national following and a very strong local fan base. So their team definitely deserves to be elevated and needs to be elevated as part of this discussion. San Diego State's one of those teams that doesn't have a very strong football program. They've been very, very inconsistent. They have a strong basketball program, so you add them for that. But in addition to that, their latest stunt trying to join the Pac-12 has developed a large national presence from that. It was very, very successful in that element, even if joining the conference ultimately was not. And so I think you add them on that element as well, because there's going to be enough people that say, well, this whole San Diego State fiasco, they're now in the Pac-12. Let's watch some games to see what's going on. And you draw in followers that way. Air Force deserves to be in there. And as this is part of, I think, what's going to be a key part of this new conference that I'm proposing is that you want the watchability. You want the regional rivalries, and you want strong football teams. Now, as part of that, and maybe not the strong football teams for the other two teams I'm going to name, but as part of the watchability, as part of the pulling in viewers, you want the Armed Forces Bowl as part of your conference. Army, Navy, Air Force, all three schools in your conference. First off, all three of those schools pull in massive numbers nationally, especially for Group of Five programs. They outpace Boise State, which is among the top Group of Five programs to be watched on television, and those three schools outpace a lot of Power Five programs, and they also compete favorably with the programs that moved up to the Big 12 from the American Athletic Conference, because they have the whole military watching them. You need to have those three schools as part of it. You're going to have basically the entire U.S. military subscribe to your platform. Good potential there for some kind of military discount deal. But you're going to have the military basically subscribe to your platform. They have the history, they have the tradition, and they, of course, have the Army-Navy game, in addition to the Air Force Army games as well, and Navy Air Force game. But the Army-Navy game, which is one of the biggest spectacles of the year, imagine having that on Apple's platform. That would be a massive boost for the year for Apple's numbers, TV ship-wise. So you need to have these three schools. So you add Air Force as the 8th member of the West Coast Conference, and then you bring in Army, you bring them out of the cold of independence, convince them to be part of the conference. I think that's where college football is trending anyway. You pull over Navy, so you have the Army-Navy game, and then you add Tulane, maybe a flash in the pan school. It's going to be difficult to tell where they go from this, but they did just go and play in a New Year's Six game, and they are showing some strong success. And they're part of, again, it's about jumping on trends and national brands. Right now, they have that national following, and you want to capitalize while it's hot. So bringing in Tulane. Memphis, another school that has that national following, been to New Year's Six games, been competing at a high level. Also doesn't hurt that they're not in a terrible geographic location either. It's nice to be able to pull in that area. And then I think you go with SMU and UTSA. SMU, I think, is a no-brainer. They've been in this discussion, they've already applied to the Pac-12. UTSA, a school that is surprised, come out of really nowhere, but they're part of that Texas market. They're on the rise, they're growing, and they have a strong football program. I think they're going to be part of that new era of the American Athletic Conference, if they stay in that, to be one of those new top schools that emerges out of the American Athletic Conference. So grab them and pull them over as well. Now, your two remaining members, there's a lot of different directions you could go with this, but I think the two best options would be to grab JMU and Liberty. This might be a little bit of a harder sell, but JMU and Liberty are two schools that have been elevated recently from the FCS, have hit the ground running. Liberty actually has the highest level of success of any team to ever go from FCS to FBS in their first 5 years. But JMU is a team that has won national championships at FCS level. They've had college game days gone to their campus twice. You create strong rivalry potential here, adding Liberty and JMU, two Virginia schools that are close to each other, that collaborate. Their ROTC programs actually collaborate. So this is a potential to add two strong up-and-comers. I've talked about Liberty on this channel before. Liberty, my other school, is another program that is on the rise, that has a massive national fan base, over 100,000 students online, in addition to having a solid residential core as well. And they are a team that has been successful at the Group of Five level, at the FBS level so far, a team that has had multiple Power 5 wins, climbed in the rankings, beat top 10 teams, and that's just in their first 5 years. They're pouring millions of dollars. They have a $2 billion endowment for their university, and they're pouring millions of dollars into their academic and athletic programs. This is a school you want to have in a conference on the rise, and I think Liberty would be a strong pool. So to summarize here, as part of the West Coast, Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, Stanford, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Air Force. And then on your East Coast, you have Army, Navy, Tulane, Memphis, JMU, LU, SMU, and UTSA. This is not just pulling in the top of the group of 5 that is out there as potential teams. This is also your watchability. These are your rivalries. Washington State, Oregon State, strong potential rivalry there, especially with the break off of Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten. Cal and Stanford, pre-existing rivalry. Boise State versus Fresno State and Boise State versus San Diego State, already pre-existing rivalries. And of course, Fresno State versus San Diego State. You're building into the geographic factor here. Of course, the Armed Forces Bowl, all 3 of those schools, Army, Navy, and Air Force. Tulane and Memphis then becomes a new potential rivalry scenario to be able to develop. JMU and Liberty, that's also schools that already have a rivalry essence about them. And this is one that you could definitely capitalize on and build a true strong rivalry. And then SMU and UTSA, the Texas battle. And of course, Liberty and SMU, you could have the Religion Bowl or something like that, the Southern Methodist University and Liberty University, of course, traditionally previously Baptist school, non-denominational now, but both Christian universities. You could have a rivalry rise from that as well. These are games that people would watch. This is college football as it truly is. This isn't just about money. This is about the love of the sport itself. And I think you're also going to get money from that as well. This conference, this one that I'm proposing, this new Pac-12, which would be the best of the best, the top of the Mountain West, the top of the rest of the group of 5, the Armed Forces Bowl. This is a conference that you could market to streaming platforms, that you could market as a Power 5 conference, certainly market as a Power 5 conference. You have multiple New Year's 6 winners in this list, or New Year's 6 attendees. You have almost every single one of these schools, except for maybe Army, Navy, has recent 10-win-plus-win seasons. These are all schools that are competing at a high level. Again, besides maybe Army, Navy, but the rest of them are competing at a high level in the group of 5 right now, or in college football in general. And this is a conference that you could market to the nation, that not only do you want to come and watch the new Pac-12, even if you aren't a fan of one of these schools, you want to at least, hit that subscribe, add that, Apple TV subscription, just to be able to watch some of these games. You could not just market that. They have their passionate fan base that you get their viewership as well, but you could also market them as a true Power 5 conference. And I said I wasn't sure whether the other one, the Mountain West merger, would be a true Power 5 conference. I believe not only would this be a true Power 5 conference, I think that this would be at least the 4th best Power 5 conference, with the potential to develop itself to compete with the Big 12. 16 teams, certainly bigger than the ACC. And the ACC, I think, is right now on the edge of becoming a non-factor in college football. And these teams that I'm talking about could definitely compete with the ACC as being one of the top conferences in the Power 5, in that top 3-4 discussion. So the 2 options I'm proposing, the one that's actually under discussion, that is potential to actually happen right now, the Mountain West merger. That's probably what I think is most likely going to happen if the Pac-12 is going to be saved. Though I still think that there's a strong potential that it just folds all together and the remaining Mountain West schools get pulled in. The remaining Pac-12 schools get pulled into the Mountain West. Not because the Mountain West schools don't want to join the Pac-12, and I think that'd be a strong move for them, but because Stanford and Cal in their ivory towers, I think, are going to mess up the whole process, like they contributed to messing up the Pac-12 in the first place, and you're going to end up with them with a situation that is not congenial to either conference, and Washington State, Oregon State move down into the Mountain West. However, to say the Pac-12, option 1, probably your most likely. Would they be Power 5? Unsure. The second option, well, not quite sure if it would happen. It's a strong potential. Elements of this have been discussed, and if the Mountain West merger breaks down, this could be the move. Would it be a Power 5, though? 100% would definitely deserve the Power 5 status. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!